I've been in India, I've been asked many times, do you mind when people line up and want to take photos with you? And my answer has always been the same. Of course not. How else would I get to meet my wonderful family of Rotary? So I never mind. My purpose this morning, I've been asked to share some information with you about strategic planning. Now I must tell you, when I say strategic planning to most audiences, two things happen. First, everybody glazes over, and secondly, they get their phone out and they start to text. But I promise you that this morning, my job is to demystify the strategic plan. So I'm going to do 4 things quickly. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we need a strategic plan, what that plan really is. I'm going to talk about how regionalization fits into our strategic plan, and then most importantly, I'm going to tell you what we need to do with the plan. How do we use it at the club level? So I'm going to ask my staff if they will advance our slides. Move to the next slide, please. So the strategic plan, several years ago, Rotary took a look at itself. And there were certain things that became apparent. As an entire organization, we were not growing. We were not engaging younger professionals to come into our ranks, and a whole host of other problems. You see, Rotary was started in 1905, but we hadn't changed anything about our operation. The world had changed. So a strategic planning committee was formed, and one of the first things we did was look at all the challenges that we face as an organization. We looked at the demographics, we looked at technology, we looked at social changes, and it became apparent that we really needed to take a look at how to move into a better future. And so that's how the Strategic Planning Committee started. I need to tell you that the first thing we did as a committee was look at each other and say, we're not going to write a single word of the plan, and we did not. The plan came from all of us. It came from Rotarians and non-Rotarians and Rotaractors and alumni, people who had some vested interest in Rotary, but it did not come from the 8 people who served on the committee. So initially, we talked to Rotarians and all those others I mentioned, and we asked questions. So we did surveying, and we did focus groups, and we did in-depth interviewing. And so then our job was to look at all that information and find out what were the big ideas that were coming forward. And that's how we got our beautiful vision statement. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change around the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. Those last 3 words are what make that vision statement so unique for us. Because it's the first time since I've been in Rotary that we are recognizing that when we help people, when we work to make life better for others, we also change ourselves. So that is a very well-received vision statement. And then our next job was to take a look at all of that data again and find out what were the big ideas that were coming forward that would help move us into a future. And we ended up calling them strategies. So our next slide, you'll see those are the 4 strategies, and I'm sure you've seen these before. I want to talk just for a minute about each of them and what they really mean as we move forward as an organization. So the first priority that we uncovered from this information, the world was saying we need to increase our impact, because impact will attract attention. Impact. You heard Trustee Jorge talk about how the Rotary Foundation has changed and made movements for greater impact with programs of scale, because they are large programs. You know, when I was early in my career as a Rotarian, we did something called matching grants. And they were wonderful. Clubs could spend as little as $1,000 US and do something good somewhere around the world. But then 10 years later, when someone would visit that location, maybe that well or that school or something wasn't in operation any longer. But there was a big sign that said Rotary had put that well in this location. It's not good public relations, it's not good for that community, and it wasn't good for Rotary. So by doing bigger projects through Future Vision, we began to ramp up our impact. And now with programs of scale, we have an amazing opportunity to really make a mark and really do impressive work. I usually tell a story here about where we've always had impact and where we could have had impact. Our program in polio eradication is one of those programs where we have always been able to say, when we eradicate polio around the globe, there will be 11 million children that will not have that disease, who will walk. And that's because of what we've all done to support the eradication of polio. That's a strong impact statement. Those kinds of statements are the statements that caught the attention of our partners. You know, when we started working on polio eradication in the mid-'80s, we had a few partners. Now, we have a dozen or more. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, the Gavi Vaccine Alliance. They recognized when they heard the power of what Rotary was doing, that they wanted to also become a part of this great health initiative. Let's contrast that with several years ago. We had a wonderful president by the name of Ian Risley. How many were in Rotary when Ian Risley was president? Do you remember what he asked us to do? And yes, he asked us to plant trees. So we did. All of us went and planted trees. One tree for every member in our club. And we counted up all the numbers of trees, and we sent that information to Rotary headquarters. And that's where it stopped. But you see, in impact, you have to start with input, and then go to output, and then go to outcome, and then impact. We could have looked at what did planting all those trees do for soil erosion where they were planted, or what did we do, how could we measure the impact on the atmosphere? But we didn't take it to that step. So there was a lesson for us that we really need to do more impactful projects. So that's what priority 1 is about, getting to impact. Our second priority is expanding our reach. And you've heard a lot from all of our presenters. President Jennifer has talked about this. It's making the magic of Rotary more accessible. It's figuring out how do we create opportunities to bring more people into our magic. Our Council on Legislation in 2016 opened the door here, because that's the council that created different club models. It created our e-clubs and our passport clubs. And so now we have a whole variety of innovative club models. And that's important. That's important. Most of us in this room are what I call legacy members. We are in legacy clubs, and we love our clubs. I love my club. I'm not going to leave it. But I also know that there are lots and lots of people in my community who cannot come to a meeting Wednesday at noontime because they're teachers and they're in school, or they're doctors and they have patients, or they're retailers and they have customers. They cannot come Wednesday at noon. And so for my club, we took a look at what are other models. We have 200,000 people in our community, and we're missing some. So we created something called an impact group. So these are people who want to do Rotary. They cannot come to meetings, so they don't have any meetings at all. They go out twice a month into the community and they do service. They come to our meetings if they want to. They come to our socials. They're part of our club. They pay full dues. And when we did an induction for those Impact Club members, we went from 40 members to 55 members in one night. And you think about how hard it is for all of us to do that. Now, in your part of the world, membership is not an issue. There are other things that are on your radar screen. And so this is also the priority that's asking us to look at making sure that we represent our communities. It asks us to look at DEI. And, I ask clubs very often, take a look at your community. And if your community looks, or your club, if your club looks like your community, then you really have a handle on your future. And if it doesn't, then you have a great opportunity. And I also, when I talk about DEI, add a letter. I add the letter B for belonging. Because ultimately, what we want members to do is feel like they belong in that club environment. So for me, it's DEIB. Our third priority is enhancing participant engagement. Now this one, it's important for you to know that participant does not just mean Rotary Club member or Rotaract Club member. It means anybody who comes into what I like to call that magic of Rotary. It could be the beneficiaries of your projects. It could be parents of students who are involved in your Rotary, either by scholarships or special programs that you have. It's anybody who comes into this magic. So we want to talk about how do we engage more people. Engagement is what focuses retention. And you're all business people, or have been business people. You know how hard it is to get a customer, to come a client, to come into your practice. When you lose that customer, to get another one, you have to work 5 times as hard to get another one. And it's the same with our Rotary clubs. When we bring them in, we want to keep them in. We want to make sure that they find value in the experience. The easiest way to do this, President Jennifer talks about it all the time, is to make sure that they feel cared for and to get to know them. So when they're coming into our Rotary clubs, let's find out why. What attracted them to Rotary? People join Rotary for different reasons. Like when we think back to Paul Harris, he was a young man who went to a new city. He didn't know anybody. So for him, getting people together, it was about fellowship. The service came much later. So he found 3 other individuals and said, let's meet each week, let's rotate and go to each other's office. And for him, that's how Rotary started. It was for fellowship and service later. Some people hear about the service that we do and they say, I want to do that. Let's roll up my sleeves. I want to get out there and I want to help the community and help the world. Perfect. Some people look at us and say, there's so much business acumen in this room. Look at all the people. If I'm in that environment, I'm going to pick up things. I'm young in my career. I can learn things. Absolutely true. And then there are others who, for the same reason, look at us and say, a lot of business people there. This would be good for my business. I could network. Absolutely true. So whatever the reason is that people are coming into Rotary, we should know it so that we're better able to craft our programs, craft our projects, craft our social activities, because you will at some point do something that that person will find that has value. Because when people don't find something valuable, what do? They take off. That's right. So we want them to stay. And then our final priority is the one that identified being able to adapt. Well, good grief. 2 years ago, we were all tested on this one, weren't we? When the coronavirus hit, the pandemic, the way we do Rotary was taken from us. And we couldn't do it that way anymore. But to our credit, Rotary never skipped a beat. Clubs around the world, including here, figured out how to connect. Some used technology. Some simply used a phone to check on each other. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do? But beyond that, what clubs did was amazing because of the response grants for COVID. Clubs all over the world were saying, how can I help my community? You know, because of polio, we know that we have a strong social mobilization. We know how to get people out into communities. I was telling someone the other night about my first visit to India. I was here to do a National Immunization Day, and I was a young Rotarian. And someone said to me, you know, on that day, 125 million children across India will be immunized. And I said, what? 125 million? That is a huge number. How is that going to happen? Well, when I got to the National Immunization Day, I could see why. Because every Rotarian, every one of you, were out in the community. All the government people were out in the community. Media out in the community. Nobody was home. Everybody was working to make sure that every child got that drop. So because of you, because of us, because of how we donate, how we volunteer, how we embrace that, we're making the world a better place. So we know how to adapt. The second part of adapting is where regionalization fits in. You see, learning how to adapt is also about our structure. It's also about how we're organized. Regionalization makes, to me, common sense, because we operate in 200 different countries and areas of the world. We have different cultures, we have different languages, we have different ways of doing things. However, we are connected by our core values: fellowship, leadership, integrity, diversity, and service. But we do it differently. And that's okay, as long as our values and our guiding principles, like our four-way test, our object of Rotary, are intact. It's okay to do it differently. You know, when I'm in my country, I tell audiences about when I was a young woman, I used to go disco dancing. And I used to wear platform shoes that were this high. And I'd put them on, and then I'd walk out, and my father would grab me by the sleeve, and he'd say, where in the world are you going with those shoes on? You're going to fall, you're going to kill yourself. I'd say, Dad, don't worry about it. We all know how to walk in them, and we all know how to dance in them. It's how we do it. And that story reminds me that the Rotarians who are coming in after me are going to want to do Rotary their way. And that's okay, as long as they are maintaining our core values and our guiding principles. Let's invite them in. Let them do it their way. So we want to be mindful of each of these priorities as we move through Rotary. So why did we create this plan? We created it to look at strategies that would move us forward. But I have to tell you, it's no longer called the strategic plan. It's called the action plan, because we are people of action. And so the action that we need to take, all of us in this auditorium are leaders, and the action that we need to take is to help get this information into our clubs. The best exercise that you can do as a Rotary leader is to take the 4 priorities to your club and have a meeting and split your club into 4 sections and give each section one of the priorities and say, I'm going to give you 30 minutes now or 20 minutes, and I want you to talk in your section about what that priority means for us. What does impact mean? Improving our impact here. How can we do that? And have the other group look at the next one. How do we talk about expanding our reach? And then the third group could look at participant engagement, and the fourth group looks at our ability to adapt and our structure. Do we have the right committees? Are we organized the right way? You know, one other story about that one. My very first Rotary Club was the Rotary Club of California, PA. There was a man in the club named Byron. Byron had been the treasurer for 34 years. What's wrong with that picture? You know, we should have said to Byron, Byron, you've done such a good job. Why don't you make a manual to show another person how to be treasurer? And we'd like you to work on the gala or on the golf outing. That was our fault for not paying attention to how we were structured and organized. We have so many talented hands in our clubs. We can find ways to give every person an opportunity to serve. So if you do that, if you get all of your clubs and split them into 4 and ask your members to talk about that, 2 very important things are going to happen. Number 1, you're going to get some good information. Your club members will tell you what they think about that priority and how your club can move it forward. The second thing that you're going to do, you're going to get something called buy-in. Buy-in is when people feel that they've had an opportunity to contribute. In the United States, we have a saying, I don't know if you have it here, but we say that people do not wash rental cars that they lease, that they use for a week, and then they take them back. They don't wash them, they don't take care of them because they don't own them. When you ask people for their opinion, even if you don't use anything that they've said, you've given them a chance to provide input, and that creates the buy-in. So when you think about all the things that I've been talking about, these 4 priorities, what it's really doing is giving you a chance to look at your club and decide, what are some things that we can transform? What are some things that we can do differently? And the reason we want to do that, ladies and gentlemen, is because we want to make our clubs simply irresistible. You know, we have challenges around the globe. Some are in membership, some are in leadership, some are in financial. We have challenges, but when we make our clubs simply irresistible, people on the outside will be so attracted. They'll see what we're doing and they'll say, I need to be part of Rotary. This is amazing. I want to be a member in this organization. And the people who are with us will say, this is fantastic. I find so much value. I'm changing the world. I'm changing myself. I'm not leaving. And our challenges will resolve themselves. So ladies and gentlemen, my question to you is, I hope you will see the importance of the 4 priorities, using them in your club, because there is no cookbook coming. There's nothing that's going to come from Rotary headquarters that says, do this, and this, and this, and you will be in compliance, because it's not that kind of action plan. Instead, these are guidelines. And we need every club in the world to take a look at the guidelines and figure out how does that make sense here. Because regionalization is real. The way you do Rotary in India is the way you do it. And it's different from the way it's done in the United States and in Canada and in other parts of the world. So we hope that you will take this information. I hope. I'm asking you as President Nominee to please share the action plan at your club so that your members can take a look at the priorities, talk about them, give that information back to you, and then help make your club simply irresistible. Thank you very much for listening. Namaste.